So friends, the Nobel Peace Prize for 2025 has been announced. US President Donald Trump was extremely desperate to win the Nobel Peace Prize. However, the 2025 Nobel Peace Prize has not been awarded to Donald Trump. Instead, it has been given to Venezuelan opposition leader Maria Corina Machado. Anyway, Trump's chances of winning this year were quite low because the 2025 prize is awarded for contributions made in 2024. The Nobel Peace Prize each year goes to someone who made a significant contribution to global peace in the previous year. In other words, what you did last year determines whether you will be honored this year. And we know that Trump's claims about stopping wars and his peace efforts are all from this year. So even if he were to be considered, it would be next year. That's why his chances this year were very slim. Still, Trump was quite hurt because he was extremely eager to win. In fact, he was almost directly demanding that he should get the Nobel Peace Prize, saying that he had stopped many wars. However, Trump didn't win, but the prize has gone to Maria Corina Machado, the Venezuelan opposition leader. Machado has been fighting for democracy and civil liberties in Venezuela for a long time. She is often called the Iron Lady of Venezuela. She enjoys strong backing from the United States, with American donors funding her movement. With US support, she has managed to stand up against Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. The government has repeatedly cracked down on her. She has been arrested, threatened, and harassed. Yet, Machado continued her peaceful resistance. For years, she has stayed inside the country, resisting Maduro's authoritarian regime instead of fleeing abroad. Her courage has inspired many Venezuelans. Machado has become the face of the pro-democracy movement in Venezuela, and it's precisely because of her long struggle that she has been honored with the Nobel Peace Prize. Now let us understand the bigger game unfolding in Venezuela. The country has the largest proven oil reserves in the world. But has that made ordinary citizens wealthy? No. For years, the benefits of Venezuela's vast resources have gone only to the top leaders and their allies, while the general population has suffered from poverty, high inflation, and shortages of basic necessities. From 1993 to 2013, Venezuela was ruled by Hugo Chavez, and since 2013, Nicolas Maduro has been in power. Under both leaders, democratic institutions weakened, citizens' rights were curtailed, and dissent was crushed. The country has been plagued by massive corruption, and internationally, both regimes are seen as authoritarian. In the 2024 elections, there was a strong popular wave in favor of Machado, but Maduro declared victory. Machado wasn't even allowed to contest the elections. She was disqualified. Opposition groups were suppressed, and there was massive election fraud. As a result, the 2024 elections are considered rigged. Maduro's regime is often described as a dictatorship. The United States has long criticized Venezuela's misgovernance, corruption, and human rights abuses, imposing multiple sanctions that have badly hurt its economy. The US aims to isolate Maduro and push for regime change in Venezuela. In this context, the awarding of the Nobel Peace Prize to Machado, a prominent figure opposing Maduro, gives her international recognition and strengthens the pro-democracy movement in Venezuela. This also increases international pressure on Maduro. The US considers the 2024 elections illegitimate and continues to demand a democratic transition in Venezuela. It has also accused Maduro's government of drug trafficking, claiming that he runs a cartel involved in smuggling drugs into the US. Recently, the US targeted Venezuelan assets and justified strikes on Venezuelan boats by claiming they were addressing security threats. Behind this lies a major geopolitical strategy. Washington wants to reduce the influence of Russia, China, and Iran in Venezuela. Venezuela's oil industry, once flourishing, has now been crippled by international sanctions. If a regime change occurs and a pro-American government comes to power, the US would have a huge opportunity to invest in Venezuela's resources and weaken Russian and Chinese influence in the region. That is why pressure is being mounted on all fronts against Maduro. Venezuela has effectively become a battleground for US, Russian, and Chinese rivalry. Russia and China both support Maduro's government. Russia recently signed a 10-year strategic partnership with Venezuela, while China is rapidly investing in its infrastructure. Both aim to counter US influence in the region. In response to US strikes, Maduro has mobilized his militias and is preparing for resistance against America. Each country has its own interests in Venezuela. The US wants oil, reduced migration and drug smuggling, and the restoration of democracy in Venezuela. That is why the US supports Machado, the pro-democracy leader, to weaken Maduro's regime. The American sanctions, military deployments, and strikes on boats are all part of this larger plan. Meanwhile, Russia is helping Venezuela bypass sanctions and to gain geopolitical leverage and counter the US. It also wants to protect its economic interests, as Venezuela still owes Moscow significant debt. Through this, Russia is sending a message. If the US challenges Russia in Ukraine, then Russia will challenge the US in Latin America. Just as Ukraine has become a proxy war zone between the US and Russia, Venezuela is now turning into another one. China, on the other hand, has its own interests. It wants to expand the Belt and Road Initiative in Latin America, strengthen its economic presence, and protect its massive investments in Venezuela. That is why both China and Russia do not want US influence to grow there. They continue supporting Maduro's regime to resist US pressure. As a result, Venezuela is stuck in a stalemate, with the US trying to remove Maduro, while Russia and China work to keep him in power. The US is promoting Machado as an alternative to Maduro because her rise would weaken Russian and Chinese influence in Venezuela. Machado is pro-US, and her leadership would help secure US interests in the region. However, while many people celebrate Machado's Nobel win, some criticize her, fearing she might prioritize US interests over Venezuela's sovereignty. After her victory, Machado dedicated her Nobel Peace Prize to Donald Trump and thanked him in a long post, a clear sign of a pro-American stance. In conclusion, the US backs Machado, while Russia and China stand with Maduro. And that is why Venezuela has now become the latest flashpoint of global power competition.